Chapter 16. I'm warned to keep quiet about certain things and receive troubling news from Rufus. Before long, school was out and days was long and almost lazy. After chores, I went fishing or for a swim. I always took my slingshot for a little target practice. Mostly I'd shoot at dead branch or an old beehive if I saw one. Boys in Holly Glen were good shots, and lots of families ate squirrel and pigeon regular, but I didn't care for hunting of any kind. Some boys was told to go out and hunt for dinner, but Aunt Agnes and Uncle Jim weren't that way. After I had pumped the day's water, fed the chickens, and milked Trotwood, they let me wander the woods or swim as I pleased. I was getting good with my whip and could knock over cans galore and just about put out the flame of a candle, though I was still knocking it over more times than I left it standing. Days passed by pleasant enough, but in general I was bored and stifled since Clyde was down in the mine and I didn't have a friend my age to play with. Just like at school, I was stuck with the little kids tagging about. They followed me to the swimming hole and through the woods and hung about my yard asking for stories about Walter Barnes. "Oh, he was a mean one," I said as I cracked my whip. "He sold a little chap by the name of Milas Kincaid to the gypsies for a $20 gold piece and all the wine he could drink. He'd sneak out at night and go visit them at their camp, which was just downriver from the orphanage. He'd dance to their violins and drink up a storm. He promised to steal more boys, which they roasted and ate." "He sounds like the devil himself. What else did he do?" said little Frank Moon. He was near 8 and awfully impressionable. He'd sit on the fence watching me practice tricks with my whip and beg for another chapter. Each time my whip cracked, he jumped, but no matter how scared he got, he wouldn't let me alone and always came back to hear more about Walter Barnes. His daddy, John Moon, was Welsh, and he came over regular for visits with Uncle Jim. Sooner or later, the two of them would lapse into Welsh, which is an altogether different language, and Aunt Agnes and I couldn't understand a thing they said. "You, Billy Creekmore, come out here," John Moon said to me one summer evening. He and Uncle Jim was on the porch in our 2 rocking chairs, smoking their pipes and talking in the cool air. "What are these stories you're telling, my boy? And will you stop it now, for the lad can't sleep for fear of Walter Barnes, whoever he is, stealing from his bed at night." "Telling stories, is he? What's all this about, Billy?" Aunt Agnes had come out to the porch to hear my response. She tossed her dishcloth over her shoulder and put her hands on her hips. "Well, Mr. Moon, sometimes, when they ask me, that is, I tell the younger ones stories about the orphanage I was at." "What kinds of stories?" asked Aunt Agnes. She wasn't at all happy to hear this, and she looked at me with a cold face. "Oh, you know, stories about the boys I knew. Funny stories." "I haven't heard about any funny stories, only scary ones. Mostly about an evil boy named Walter Barnes who robs and steals and sells children to the gypsies. Frank's just a wee lad, Billy. Will you stop it, please? I can't sleep at night for his crying." "No more stories, Billy," said Uncle Jim. "A miner's work is too dangerous to go about it half dead with fatigue." Aunt Agnes shook her head in disgust. "Don't worry none, John. He'll stop his tales about Walter Barnes, won't you, Billy? There'll be trouble if you don't." She gave me a stern look, then stomped off to the kitchen. "Don't be harsh on him, Agnes," Mr. Moon called after her. "He didn't mean any harm by it. I'd wager he's bored, wishing to be with his friend Clyde and the older boys in the mine. How old is he now, Jim? He'll be down with us soon enough, won't he?" "He'll be there before long. Has his mind set on being a mule driver, he does." "You could start him now if you want," said Mr. Moon. "I've seen him with coppers in the wagon. He did a fine job keeping him steady when you picked up that load of lumber. He's good enough to learn the trade." "Oh, yes, Uncle Jim, please let me. I'm the oldest boy in school, and I don't want to go back come September." "We'll see, lad, we'll see. I'll talk to the foreman soon enough to see if there's an opening for you. You'll be there before you know it. Don't be rushing to go into the mines, lad."